when we
An audio recording obtained exclusively by the BBC captures the moment a gunman struck a free speech debate in the Danish capital, Copenhagen. Denmark's security services had already assessed the threat the country faced, and this weekend that assessment became a ruthless reality. 2 innocent civilians were cynically executed, 5 police officers were wounded by gunfire, and later an alleged offender was shot dead by the police. The Danish Police and National Intelligence Service, PET, have long prepared and trained for a possible terror attack, not least drawing on the hard-earned experience of the UK's MI5 and the Metropolitan Police after the London bombings of the 7th July 2005. But there has not been a fatal terror incident in Denmark for 20 years, and many people were immersed in a fairy tale notion of living and complete safety. With the Copenhagen shootings, Denmark's innocence has been bruised, and we're all in shock. On the January the 9th, Norway's website News in English wrote that Norway's Police Intelligence Unit, PAST, was investigating a report on a French website that Denmark and Norway are the next targets of extremist Islamic terrorists. We have to remember that both Norway and Denmark have been caught in early conflicts over publication of comic pictures of the Islamic prophet Muhammad, and security was being boosted around Oslo. Norwegian police, who only recently started carrying arms because of an already high terror threat level in Norway, are now carrying automatic weapons instead of pistols. Several news media firms in Oslo have also boosted security, as has the Islamic Cultural Center and its mosque in Oslo. On the 11th January, German newspaper Bild am Sonntag, referring to the US National Security Agency, stated that attack in Paris was just the beginning of a serious terrorist attack in Europe. The newspaper reported that NSA employees spied a telephone conversation of the leaders of the Islamic State, which shows that they are planning a wave of terror, and the events in Paris was just a beginning. Rome was mentioned in the conversation. Could Sweden be next European terror target? Bright orange hearts are pinned to the walls of the Danish embassy in Stockholm on Monday. One written in Swedish says, "We are behind you, Denmark." Another simply says, "Love." Flowers and candles are scattered on the pavement. The mood is calm, but what has happened over the border in Denmark has nevertheless sent shockwaves through the more than 43,000 strong Danish community in Sweden. I absolutely think that Sweden could be hit next, says Tobias Wurtz, a Danish music producer based in Stockholm. Everybody's worried, the other voice adds. On Sunday, Sweden's Home Affairs Minister Anders Ygeman said that he was committed to strengthening security and confirmed that discussions were taking place between the government and religious groups. Sweden has only experienced homegrown terrorism once in recent years, with a suicide bombing in central Stockholm in 2010. Mount Area Islamic State posted a video threatening Putin over his support for Syria's Bashar al-Assad in response to a head of Russia's Chechen Republic Ramzan Kadyrov vote to destroy ISIS, saying, "I state with full responsibility that one of who had the idea to express a threat to Russia and say the name of the president of the country, Vladimir Putin, will be destroyed where he did it. Kadyrov said it. Emphasized that they finished their days under the hot sun in Syria and Iraq, and in the first instant of death meet their eternal flame. Is there a real threat to Russia? Ivan Elon, defense analyst, gives his point of view.
Probably not much. I'm not sure the U.S. is much either right now. This is a regional threat. It's confined to Syria, Iraq, and perhaps part of Lebanon. You have to have a Sunni population that's been radicalized to some extent to provide shelter for the fighters. And the reason that they're getting so much shelter in Iraq is because the Shiite government had been oppressing the Sunnis. If Iraq would be decentralized, say, with the Shiite government no longer oppressing the Sunnis, and if they were allowed to run their own affairs, they would probably do what they did with Al-Qaeda in Iraq, the precursor to this group, and that is forces, that's sort of the law enforcement forces. And if you're fighting it publicly, either rhetorically or with actual bombing, as the United States is doing in Iraq now, you're really not getting anywhere, and you're probably creating more fighters than you're killing.
How will Europe handle the rise terrorist attacks? Brookings Senior Fellow Daniel Benjamin analyzes terror and national security in Europe.
We have seen around the world, not just in Europe, a rising incidents of attacks by self-starters, by homegrown extremists who seem to want to act up because primarily of the success of ISIS in Iraq and Syria. At the same time, we don't know if that is the link here, whether these are self-starters. They certainly seem proficient with weapons, which would make you think that they're not self-starters. There was one wire report that suggested that they may have had to do with Al-Qaeda in Yemen. So there are a huge number of question marks right now. It's certainly a period of high tension in Europe and a lot of concern about returning foreign fighters, but there's just too much that we don't know right now.
Who's funding ISIS? NBC News published an article in which current and former US officials say that a small but steady flow of money goes to ISIS from rich individuals from Arabic countries, with Qataris the biggest suppliers. No one in the US government is putting a number on the current rate of donations, but some of the members pointing out that the cash flow from private donors is significant. General Martin Dempsey.
It really comes down to building a coalition so that what the Arab Muslim world sees is them rejecting ISIS, not us.
They already reject ISIL. Do you know any major Arab ally that embraces ISIL?
I know major Arab allies who fund them.
And head of the Russian Chechen Republic, Ramzan Kadyrov, said the Islamic State is the creation of the United States and other Western countries that have declared a covert war against Islam. Their brutality, shootings, beheadings, burnings are the direct continuation of what the killers of righteous caliphs did. We cannot help this modest review of the post-9/11 years. At that time, it was hard to convince Americans that there could be nothing worse than Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, so the whole America went to the war with terror. From the moment the first bombs began falling on Afghanistan in October 2001 to the present, not a single US military intervention has had anything like its intended effect. Each one in time proven a disaster in its own special way, providing grounds for another set of jihadist movements. ISIS knows it well. Americans prefer to believe that all problems have solutions. But ISIS lives and breathes and grows. Weaker and weaker America, along with fragile and not prepared for any intervention since 1980s, NATO need great targets and big operations. They forget that it's a very dangerous game and we will all get burned with it.